Anxiety is a powerful, powerful thing. Anxiety loves to travel with fear and it loves to travel with self-doubt. And it works to pull you out of that moment that you're in and take that presence away from you. Anxiety showed up in my life at a very young age in a lot of different ways. And one of the big ways it showed up was in my physical sensations, where I would have stomach aches and headaches for weeks at a time. And no one could quite understand why. And I couldn't understand it myself, never mind communicate why I was feeling so worried all the time. And even if I could communicate how worried I was feeling all the time, I then had to overcome that shame I felt for feeling that way in the first place. When anxiety and worry is your norm, you can't just say, oh, it's this and this that's happening, because it's always happening. And it's so hard to be able to explain. And a lot of people don't get that from the outside. A lot of people told me, oh, it's not a big deal. You should just calm down. A lot of things like that. And this showed up in my life in so many different ways. Academically, where say I had lost my pencil, I would get super worked up for losing my pencil. But from the outside, a lot of teachers were like, here's another pencil, calm down. When in reality, it wasn't necessarily the pencil losing that I was reacting to. It was the catastrophic spiral that came with that original stimulus. So me losing that pencil meant, oh, if I lose this pencil, then I can't finish my assignment. If I can't finish my assignment, I'm going to fail out of school. And if I fail out of school, then I'm never going to get a job and I'm just going to fail at life. That's what I was reacting to. Or it showed up in my relationships where, say, my friends didn't invite me to a party, that would spiral too into, why didn't I get invited to that party? Am I not good enough to be invited to that party? My friends must not like me. I'm not likable. I'm not lovable. No one's ever going to love me and I'm going to be alone forever. That thought, that end of the chain catastrophic thought became my reality and my own internal landscape. People don't get overwhelmed and upset over the little things for absolutely no reason, because there's so much more underneath that surface. And we need to start being curious of what that is.
Looking back, I was experiencing symptoms of depression before I even really knew what depression was. It started out with things like sleeping longer than usual because I just didn't feel like waking up, not eating when I would normally eat because I just wasn't feeling hungry, skipping out on activities like the movies and dancing, things I loved, just because I didn't really feel like going. I started to only see the wrong in everything around me. I would only see negativity in the world and the people I interacted with, but particularly I felt very, very negative about myself. I became very overly critical of who I was, the way I acted, what I wore, the way I spoke, how I looked, the grades I got. And over time, this transformed into, I hate myself. I don't like who I am. I don't feel like I'm worthy of love. Everyone around me is so much better than I am. And feeling that again and again brought me into this deep sadness that I couldn't pull myself out of. I started to feel physically nauseous from everything that I was feeling. I had a pounding headache all the time I couldn't seem to get rid of. And the hardest part about all of this was I didn't even know how to explain what I was feeling. And that caused very significant difficulty with the people around me, because sometimes I wanted to completely isolate and be alone and be away from everyone. And sometimes I needed to feel constant love and affection and support because of how terrible I was feeling. And because I didn't know how to communicate what I needed when, I felt like people were always letting me down and that no one understood, and I was so alone. I started to become very irritable, very angry. I started engaging in self-injurious behavior. One, because I needed to stop feeling so numb from all the pain and feel human again. But two, because I needed to show people how badly I was feeling because the intensity of my pain was not visible to them. It was a cry for help at a time when I didn't know how to ask. And even though I knew that help was available, I had gotten to a point where I didn't even feel like I deserved to be happy. I thought my entire life is going to be this way, so why even try?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Scott from Philadelphia. I'm one of the speakers with Minding Your Mind. And today, real quickly, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about coping skills. And in a more particular way, I want to talk about this term that I came up with that's helped me tremendously, especially in the past few years. So the term is called emergency joys. Now, I know when you hear that, you might think, okay, emergency joys, how do those things go together? Emergency is a serious thing, and a joy is when you're happy, right? How do they tie together? Well, I'll tell you. An emergency joy is this. They are those 2 or 3 positive coping skills that every single one of us has in our lives right now. Yes, you have them too, we all do. And we hold on to these positive coping skills and we turn to them when we find ourselves in those moments in life where we feel like things will never get better. When we find ourselves in that really dark place and it seems like nothing anybody can say or anybody can do can help us through that, to find that hope again. It's my friends, when we're in that moment, it's when we find ourselves in that place that we turn into our back pockets, so to speak, and we pull out these little emergency joys. Now, in these moments, these emergency joys, look, they don't get rid of our problems. They don't make any mental health issues go away. They don't make everything okay. They don't do any of that. But you know what they do? They give us a little bit of hope at a time where we feel like we don't have any. And my friends, when we have hope in our lives, even if it's just a little bit, that's when we're more likely to go seek out help. And when we seek out help, that's when we finally learn how to heal. But friends, look, there is no healing and there is no help until we first find hope. And emergency joys are kind of that catalyst that bring that hope into our lives again. And for you, the emergency joys might be different than what they are for me. They're different for everybody. That's the amazing thing about it. So for you, I want you to identify what your emergency joys are. And you want to hold on to those so that the next time you find yourself in one of those really difficult spots, one of those down places that you're in, you want to turn to those emergency joys, not to make all your problems go away, not to make everything okay, but to give you some hope, to give you hope for tomorrow, to give you hope that you will be able to make it through what you're going through in that moment right now.
Hi, I'm Linda Price with Minding Your Mind. If I was having some big emotions, I want to believe that I can handle it. That builds our resilience. And when we know we can handle it, we feel more confident to be able to pause and take some deep breaths to calm ourselves down. But when we get so overwhelmed, those negative thoughts come flying in and can end up feeling like big waves knocking us over. We can get so overwhelmed that it's hard to get out of that emotional brain where we might be in the fight, flight, or freeze when our amygdala is firing in that emotional brain, right? We want to be able to calm that emotional brain so we can get to our thinking brain and we remember to kind of stop and relax and think. We can pause. We can take a full belly breath in and out. And we can do that by placing our middle fingers on our belly button. And as we breathe in, our middle fingers just part slightly. You breathe in, and your belly fills with breath like a balloon, and our middle fingers part slightly. And then as we exhale, our middle fingers go back together. And we try that again. We breathe in, maybe for the count of 4. Belly rises, fingers part slightly, and then we can exhale for 8. Fingers go back together, belly button goes back toward our spine. And you can always try that 4, 7, 8 breath where you breathe in for the count of 4, pause for 7, and breathe out for 8. So again, breathing in, feeling the belly fill with breath like a balloon, the fingers separate slightly. For the count of 4, pause for 7, and then exhaling for 8, long and slow. The belly button drops toward the spine and the middle fingers go back together. Breathing in for 4, 2, 3, 4, holding for 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then breathing out for 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Trying it now on your own. Breathing into the belly, filling it with breath. Pausing at the top. And then exhaling long and slow. Just noticing how you feel. That slow belly breathing can be really helpful, and the longer exhale is calming for the nervous system. So that gets us out of our emotional brain and back to our thinking brain, where we're able to say what we mean and not something where we speak and then regret something that we didn't mean to say, that we didn't want to say, that's something that might be hurtful to someone else, or just not communicating the way we really meant it. So we can build this resilience by practicing our belly breathing every single day, even once a day, maybe even just for a cycle of 2 or 3 different breath cycles. So maybe trying that even just once, to breathe into your belly, counting to 4, pausing for 7 and breathing out for 8 can be enough to calm the nervous system. So try that today. Even though the waves of stress can come in and out, we know that they will not last forever. It comes and it goes, and we can handle it. I can do this, right? So just remember that mantra, I can do this. So can you. Have a great day.
Hi, my name is Wes Woodson, and I have the honor of being a young adult speaker with Minding Your Mind. I travel around the country speaking to students, parents, just like you, about my own story of dealing with anxiety, more specifically, trying to battle perfectionism and self-doubt and always feeling like I was an imposter. But the reason why I'm so excited in sharing my story, and a big reason why I share my story, is to encourage kids that they're not alone. In fact, that they are good enough just the way they are. But if I'm being honest with you, there's another reason why I actually share my story. You see, specifically around the time when the pandemic started and the mental health conversation became more popular, I was so excited that people were finally talking about this thing that I always felt like I was the only person in the world who ever felt this way. But whenever I look on the news or YouTube or social media, I would only see people talking about it who didn't look like me. I mean, it felt like everyone was talking about mental health, but not many people who were talking about mental health looked like me. And for me, seeing that, it made me feel more isolated. It made me feel like no one would understand this feeling. So whenever I go on stage, whether I'm on a school or on a virtual call, I try to bring representation and diversity into the mental health conversation. Because for me, I used to always feel like I was the only kid in the world that ever felt this way, that I was never good enough, that I always had this invisible feeling of anxiety and people always watching me. But how I've learned to better deal with that is I've learned how to build what I call a toolbox. Now, a toolbox is not the one that your parents keep in the garage. A toolbox is a set of positive coping mechanisms that we can use to better manage our mental health challenges. And for me, I have 3 things in my toolbox that I use almost every single day, and I want to share them with you. The first thing I do is I love to exercise. I love to go for walks. I love to lift weights. The second thing I do, well, I love to journal. But inside my journal, I always pick 3 things to be grateful for. I call them the magic 3s. Now, the magic 3s are 3 things in my life that I am grateful for. I pick a very big thing like my family. Second, I pick a very in the present moment thing like the clothes that I have on my back. And then thirdly, I pick a very small thing, like a very, very small thing, like the breath that's coming out of my mouth. But the last thing in my toolbox is I go to therapy. And the biggest thing about this whole toolbox is I use all of them, not just one thing and one thing only, because when I have, well, it's gotten better. So I invite you to build your own toolbox, and hopefully we get to meet soon, because this mental health conversation, although it's starting to take place on a bigger level, well, it's just starting to become more diverse. And I can't wait to continue the mental health conversation with you. See you soon.
Hi, my name is John Madelman, and I'm the Clinical Director for the New England Mind Your Mind. I'm so happy to be here today to talk about mental health, but I want to talk about mental health in a very specific way. At some point in your life, someone important to you, it could be a partner, it could be a child, a relative, a coworker, a friend, is going to share with you that they are struggling with their mental health. Maybe they're going to say, I suffer with anxiety, with depression, I have thoughts of self-harm and suicide. And what we want to do in that moment is convey that we care about them, that we hear them, that we want to support them. But so often when people share those sort of things, we don't know what to say and we say the wrong things. So I want to talk a lot about the wrong things to say. At the end, I will talk about some of the right things. So let's pretend somebody has told you that they have anxiety, or maybe they have a big event coming up and they say, I'm too anxious, I can't go. A bad response, a non-helpful response would be, it's not a big deal, or get over it, or I have that too, or it's all in your head. Well, of course, anxiety is all in your head. None of those statements are particularly helpful. Or maybe someone you know is suffering with depression, and you say something like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. I have depression too. Or just put one foot in front of the other, or you're not trying hard enough. All of those statements are not really helpful. It's very interesting. We judge ourselves by our intentions. I have no doubt when you respond to something like that, your intentions are to be helpful, but others judge us on our actions. And those actions from another person's point of view really feel overwhelming, feel the opposite of helpful. So what would be helpful if someone says something like that to you? The very first thing I think you ought to say is, thank you for sharing it. Let's remember that could be the hardest thing that person has ever said to anyone ever. We want to acknowledge it. We want to say thank you. The next thing we want to say to them is tell me more. We want to open up conversation. We want to show them we're not going to be judgmental, and mostly we want to listen. You know, in our culture, we're always quick with an opinion, a very quick, like what we feel and what to do and how to fix it. We don't want to fix it. We don't want to judge it. We don't want to have people feel shameful. So saying thank you for sharing that starts the conversation. Tell me more opens up the conversation, and really listening. At the end of the conversation, it might be multiple conversations. We need to say, thank you for sharing that. I don't know if that was hard for you to do, but it may have been. And if it was hard, I so appreciate it. Let's talk more. Or how can we get you some support? Or what can I do to support you? Because I care a lot about you. So let's remember when we're in those situations, let's avoid saying the things which are not helpful, and let's really focus on the one or two things that are really helpful, and I think you'll be fine. You don't need to be a therapist to respond well, but you need to be a person in the moment. You need to listen, and you need to be attentive and say the right things and avoid the wrong things. Thanks so much for listening.